Hi, welcome back to the Drunken Bibliophile. Today we're going to be reviewing The Ruins by Scott Smith. This book was written in 2006. They made a movie of it, I believe, in 2009. As usual, I'm just going to give you a synopsis. At the end, I'll give you my views of it, a fairly detailed synopsis, spoilers and all that, so just be aware. Right. So we are introduced to the four main characters. Are Stacy and Amy are best friends. Their boyfriends are Eric and Jeff, who are friendly with each other but not exactly friends. They just know each other through the girls. They go to Mexico on vacation to the Yucatan Peninsula. There they meet a German tourist named Matthias who got separated from his brother Henrik when Henrik fell in love with an archaeologist and ran off to her dig with her. They also meet three Greeks who speak neither English nor Spanish, so they have a difficulty communicating with them, but they end up giving them the nicknames Juan, Pablo, and Don Quixote. Now, Stacy ends up making out with one of them. I believe it was Don Quixote she made out with. They, after a while, they're hanging out, doing touristy things, getting drunk and whatnot. Matthias convinces them to go help him look for his brother. His brother left a note with a map and directions on how to get to this archaeological site so that they can, go join up with him. Matthias' plan, obviously, is to get his brother and go back to Germany so they can both go home. Pablo, one of the Greeks, is there. They kind of get the point across that, hey, you want to come with us. The other two Greeks are off doing, whatever summer party things. So they ended up, catching a ride and driving, hours and hours away, following these directions. When they get there, the truck driver that they hitched a ride with told them, we'll take you somewhere else. This is a bad place. They don't listen. They get out and they decide to carry on anyway. So they come across the Mayan village following the directions. The directions said if you come across the Mayan village, you've gone too far. So they know they've gone too far. For the most part, the Mayans in the village just kind of ignore them. Excuse me. And blow them off. Alright. So they kind of backtrack a little bit and they're looking across this field and they find a path that's been purposefully hidden. There's fresh branches cut and laid over it to make it look like it's just part of the jungle. So they follow down this path and they come across a enormous hill covered in vines and flowers. And they can see a tent all the way at the top of it. So, they think they found their archaeological site. Before they can actually start trekking up, some Mayans from the village ride horses over. They're in a pretty big haste and they're yelling. Obviously, there's a communication barrier. The Mayans are speaking, whatever dialect of Spanish they speak. These guys speak English and, Greek. Obviously, there's a communication barrier. So they decide, they don't decide. They're arguing. They're trying to figure out what's going on. And Amy, being a photographer, is taking pictures of the whole scenario. She keeps backing up so she can get a wider and wider shot, so she can get the Mayans on the horseback with the weapons in the same frame as, the tourists with the, tourist things. While she's doing that, she backs right up to the hill, gets her foot caught in some of the vines. The Mayans immediately change their attitude, and instead of trying to get them to leave, now they force them at gunpoint to this hill. Alright, so that's, they're kind of taken aback, but they decide to go up the hill and see what's going on. They follow the path up. They come across the top of the hill, which is flattened out. In the middle of it is a sort of a mine shaft that goes straight down with a type of windlass straddling it. They go ahead and finish going down the path on the other side, thinking, we'll just go down the other side of the hill, back into the forest, and get out of here. They notice that there's Mayans at the other end of at the other side of the hill too. realize they're getting surrounded and they're not going to be able to leave. They go back up and decide to start exploring. During this time, Jeff, who seems to be about the most level-headed, maybe not the most likable character, but he seems to be handling the stress better than everybody else, takes a tour around the base of the hill. Comes across, he notices that there's the hill and then a large patch of bare earth and then the jungle. He kind of notices that that earth has been salted, so nothing will grow there, but there's still mounds of these vines that are hanging over into it. He goes over to explore one. Him and a couple of the other guys, Jeff and Matthias. They go over to explore it. They start tearing open, and they find Matthias' brother, Henrik. He's partially decomposed, partially eaten away. He's got arrows stuck in him, the same type of arrows that some of the Mayans are carrying to keep them on the hill. So they now realize the Mayans are perfectly willing to use lethal force. So they also notice while they're tearing these vines off of him, as they break the vines open, the sap is pretty caustic. It's burning their hands like acid. So they head back up the hill, and they decide, while they're up there, they hear a cell phone ringing from the mine shaft. So obviously they want to get down there. Ends up settling, Pablo volunteers. They hook him up to the windlass and start reeling him down. Thing is, these vines have been growing up over this windlass, and some are getting crushed, and they notice that the sap again is eaten out and starting to eat through the rope, and decide, hey, we should haul him up. Start hauling him up. The rope breaks and he falls some distance down, like quite a ways. Far enough to hurt himself very badly. Broken legs, broken spine. He's in a lot of pain. So, then Eric, they kind of pull the rope up, clean all the vines off, clean it up, add some more. They cut one of the tents up to add some length to the rope, get everything woven together, and lower Eric down to assess the situation. He notices, the guy's, Pablo's pretty jacked up, but he's talking to him, keeping him calm as best he can, even though they do have that language barrier. Then they next send Amy down with a makeshift backboard. They use part of a backpack and some more, canvas straps and all that. Lower her down, and they kind of rig up this half-ass structure to pull Pablo back up so they can help him. They really mess him up. It's a pretty bad situation. Doesn't lower down far enough. They have to pick him up, which for a broken back is obviously, out of the question. He starts flipping out again. He's obviously in agony, but they get him loaded up, haul him up, and then themselves eventually end up getting hauled up as well. Now, they've heard the cell phone go off a few times. They didn't have enough lighting to go over and look for it, so they're kind of putting a pin in that for now. Alright. So, now, what they're coming to realize is they're stuck on this hill. Over the next few chapters, it's basically them going through various forms of hell. They end up going back down the mine shaft looking for the cell phone. At this point, they discovered that the vines themselves are making the noise of the cell phone, and they're doing it on purpose. They discover these vines are like a sentient being that own this hill. The Mayans are either keeping it on the hill, and they don't do anything else because they're scared of it, or it's kind of a ritual, maybe a religious thing, where they are, just kind of occasionally, when the opportunity arises, offer this hill as sacrifice of people. There's no animals on this hill, there's no bugs, nothing. So they're stuck here by themselves. At this point, over the night, Amy gets drunk and gets into an argument with Jeff. Jeff, apparently they give the impression that this happens, that always Jeff apologizes. Then, Amy feels better about herself. Jeff is resentful of it. Whatever. So she wanders off, kind of drunk, and she starts calling for him. He kind of blows her off. He's like, no, not this time. Well, turns out later, Matthias finds her. She was calling for help because the vines were reaching up and choking her. They're not only sentient, they are also prehensile. They can grab things. So she died. And at some point, they decide to amputate Pablo's legs because they're getting infected and they're gross. Turns out his spine's not completely severed because he feels all of it. They hack through the muscle with a knife. They break the bones with a rock. They cauterize it with a frying pan. It's a terrible process told in graphic detail. The plants keep messing with them. They say phrases that they've heard. They're kind of recombining things. They're using their voices to say things to upset each other. It's, like I said, psychological warfare on the part of the plants. Now, during a rainstorm, Jeff decides he's going to try to leave. He's going to try to sneak through while it's raining. He does not make it. He gets killed. By the Mayans. They shoot him full of arrows, and he dies, and the vines eat him. Well, it's worth noting that Eric had got a gut on his leg, and the vines have been growing onto it. Every time he goes to sleep, the vines will creep up on it and start, suckling at his wound. And he gets really paranoid, thinking that the vines are actually inside of him. So he's super paranoid. He's cut into his leg, trying to find out where these vines are at. He thinks it's in his abdomen, but he's basically going crazy about this. So eventually, he's left alone long enough. He is literally chopping himself into pieces, flensing skin off. He's got his stomach cut open. He's got all the skin and muscle torn off of his leg. He's just like a ghoul, just bloody tatters. Matthias is probably the only one who's completely unaffected by most of this. He's freaked out, but he's still stayed level-headed. Goes to try to take the knife from him, coax him out of it, and Eric in this panicked frenzy stabs him, kills him. And then Stacy, at Eric's request, stabs him. He's like, just put me out of my misery. And she does. Stabs him in his heart. The vines take them all. That leaves Stacy. Stacy decides that she's going to leave herself as a warning to the next travelers. So she goes to the base of the hill while the Mayans are watching her, all with an air of they've all seen this before, so they're kind of bored with it. She takes the knife, she cuts her wrists, and kneels down there in the black earth surrounding the temple, or the hill. The vines, of course, don't leave her there as a warning. They come out, creep her out while she's still alive, and pull her back, so she kind of dies, realizing that her last effort was futile. And the book more or less ends there. The only other thing of note is that the directions and note they left for the other Greeks had gotten back to the Greeks, and a few days later they show up with their own little party, and they're halfway up the hill before the Mayans have any chance to warn them, so presumably these actions and events will repeat themselves over and over again. So, this book is obviously, it's a horror book. The thing is about the pacing on it, the first 50 pages or so are just kind of setting up, here's how the characters are, here's their personalities, here's how they met. Then, right around page 50 or so, and 300 and something pages, maybe 312 pages, it's just horrible thing after horrible thing happening. And it's told pretty well overall. Scott Smith did a very good job telling the story. And it's hard to describe. It starts getting freaky when the Mayans force him up the hill. Then when Pablo falls down the mine shaft, after that, nothing good happens. It's just one horror after another being visited on these young tourists who are just trying their best to cope with it and eventually fail at it. They all die, and the cycle repeats itself. I heard about this book when I saw the movie, about 2009 or so. I saw the movie. It was very good. And, one of the titles was, based on the book by Scott Smith, so I decided to go ahead and look for it and found it, and I read it. So, I do recommend it. If you have a chance to read it, go ahead and do it. pick it up at a thrift store, a Kindle online. I like the I like having the physical books myself rather than a Kindle. I just old like that, I guess. Anyway, thanks for joining me. Enjoy reading, enjoy the books, and have a drink on me. Have a good one.